Christian parenting. I'm Julie Lyles-Carr. You're listening to the All Mom Does podcast, part of the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Today on the All Mom Does podcast, I have someone on who I can say I've known her whole life. I have Avery Laughlin on, who's an amazing artist, an amazing children's book writer. And I really have known her always. Avery, I'm so glad to have you on the podcast today.
Well, thank you so much, Julie, for letting me jump on this podcast with you. We really have known each other my entire life.
Your whole life. Yeah, exactly.
So it's actually really cool to have almost like a full circle moment in this, just from childhood to adulthood. So
yeah, to today. I love it. So tell my listeners where you're living, who you're married to, about the kid situation, all the things.
Of course. So I am Avery Laughlin, and I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with my husband and my one son and one on the way, which we just found out it's a little boy too. So we're going to have two little boys. So I'm an artist and illustrator and now kind of author and creator of a book. So that's where I am right now.
I love it. And, you know, the way that we intersected lives a long time ago when you were just a twinkle in your dad's eye, and then once you were born, was we all hailed from Tulsa, Oklahoma years ago. Now, I wasn't born and raised in Tulsa. I lived all over the place, but my husband was originally from Tulsa. And when we got married and were expecting our first child, we moved back to Tulsa. His mom and dad were there and had deep, deep roots in the Tulsa community. Your family's been from Tulsa for a long time. And there's a little factoid about you, it's not trivia, but it is trivia. It's not trivial, but it's a little bit of trivia about your family of origin in the Tulsa area that I know some of my listeners are going to be familiar with. So fill my listeners in on your maiden name and who that connects you to and the very unusual childhood that you had.
Yeah, of course. So my maiden name is Hanson. So my three eldest brothers, I'm one of seven. So my three eldest brothers are part of a band called Hanson. Your listeners might be most recognizable of their song of Mbop back in 97, which was when it was at its height. And my youngest brother is also a musician. So there's lots of music in my family, art and everything. But I kind of grew up very uniquely traveling the world and to do things that not many 30-year-olds say that they got to do as a kid. So that kind of shaped me very different than others, and it gave me a much more broader worldly view of things. So that was kind of my growing up experience. And my family still is the majority of them are in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and my brothers have kind of built their record label there as well. So, and then my youngest brother, who's also a musician, is out in California doing music with his band, Mac and the Joshua and the Holy Rollers.
Yeah, that band, yeah.
That's them.
Yeah, you know, it's fascinating because we got to tag along for a lot of your childhood, and you and my oldest daughter are best friends, and we got to have some really unique experiences because of that family affiliation. What I love in our shared story together is that this family connection started long before you and me, baby. I mean, you know, I think about how long your grandparents were good friends with my husband's grandparents, and then my in-laws were dear friends, but were enough older than your folks that they were mentors to your parents. And then your parents became really beloved friends of mine and my husband's and mentors to us, and showing, you know, they were navigating the way ahead of us in terms of marriage and family and all the things. And these relationships have continued all the way down now to the newest generation, where some of your brother's kids are really good friends with some of my youngest kids. So it's a really fascinating generational connection, which not a lot of people get to experience today. And one thing that I think was really exceptional to me, that I've really held on to and has a lot of value to me, is the fact that your family has always been so great about not getting so hung up on ages and stages in terms of friendships. I believe that you and I have a beautiful friendship, and I have friendships with your other siblings, but I also have this great friendship with your mom. And I feel like you guys reciprocate that. And it has nothing to do with the ages we are, because we're all in different seasons of life. We're all at different stages of wisdom and things that we've learned. What was it like growing up with a family that really did such a great job of keeping you in a situation where you were constantly navigating between people of all different seasons of life?
Yeah, no, that's a really great point in that, you have also become more of a mentor and somebody I've looked up to as a child, and now as an adult and a mother. And so, our families have been so connected, but like growing up, being able to see and do different things that my friends may not have gotten to do really shaped me differently. And it gave me more confidence and it gave me, just the ability to walk up to a person that was maybe 10 years older than me and just have a conversation and not feel like I was a child in the conversation, but more of like somewhere along the same level and just being able to feel like someone could hear me and talk to me and not think, oh, you're like a little kid or you're a young adult or something. So that kind of has shaped who I am and given me that confidence, knowing that I have great relationships with all my siblings, and my eldest brother and I are probably the most similar, but we are 10 years apart. He's doing life way more beyond me, in those 10 years. And so he has that experience and that I can lean on him or any of my older siblings and call on them. And so those relationships have really made us bonded together strongly. And so I can look up to them as well and be like, wow, okay, so I'm not so alone in this moment or in this, time or in this motherhood stage. So one of the things that my church that I attend talks about is, it's good to have mothers to follow and sisters to share secrets with. And so, I have like yourself and other women in my life that are a little bit further down the line in life that I can call upon, whether they're being my parents. My mom is a wealth of knowledge. My dad is a wealth of knowledge. They're amazing people to lean on and talk to about where, my husband and I are in our stage of life and our stage of parenting or finances or buying a house or different things. And so it's been great to have those people in my life that I can look up to and walk alongside with.
How do you feel like people who are older, who are saying, I have things that I do want to help give to a younger generation. I've now got the teenagers in my house, but I remember being the mom with the toddler and feeling maybe a little isolated or a little overwhelmed at his sleep schedule or whatever the thing is. How do we stay in a place where, in your case, you're open to reaching out to that older generation? And I know for you, it was just how you were raised, but I know you have observations on that as well. And how do people then also remain in a place where they can feel relevant, that they would be someone you would want to seek out? Because I got to be honest, Avery, there were some women in my world who were just enough ahead of me on the curve or who were 20 years down the line that there's no way I was going to listen to them. Yeah. I don't mean it in a mean way, but I would look like, no, I don't really, no, I don't want to emulate. So how do we do a good self-check to make sure we're both being open to the wisdom that might be with those who are ahead of us? But if we're all ahead of somebody, right? We're all leading the pack for somebody. And how do we make sure that we're the people we need to be, that we're worth being sought out?
I think that's a great point, because there are people even in my life that I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. Thanks for that thought. Thanks for that advice. I'm not sure if I want to take that. But, I think what you have to do is humble yourself, because there's somebody that's ahead of you in your life that has walked through it, maybe had more struggles than you, but they have much more wisdom in walking through what you're going through that makes that what seemed like, trudging through mud so much more easily done. And so for me, I've had those experiences where moms, a year, maybe 2 years, even a couple of months ahead of me, come up to me and give me advice, and it can be received in such a negative way. But what I need to do and what I choose to do is receive it in a positive way, knowing that they're just trying to share what they've learned. And it's better for me to receive that in a way that is going to bless my heart rather than take offense. So, and that's how I try to choose to receive those advice.
Right, right. I do think we tend, and I think some of it comes because from a very early age, we are put in first grade with the kids who have birthdays between this time and this time. So we're all at a similar age and stage of life. And then we go into second grade with the same kids of this time to this time. And that continues. And I've seen it continue even in things like a book club or a group at church or a small group at church, where obviously there is some really beautiful resonance that can happen when you're walking alongside people who are in the same season of life as you, when you all have babies together or you all have preteens together and you can commiserate and you can share ideas. But how do we get out of the cycle of only looking for people who are our immediate age or stage, or who are the ones who are the most familiar to us, opening ourselves up to other people who have other experiences?
I think the best thing to do, and what I've tried to do in my life too, is look to women that I admire, look to women that I think have done things in a way that I believe would be aligned with how I want to raise my child, or how I want to do certain things, like whether it being in art or raising my son, and soon to be two sons, and just ask them, how did you do it? Like, just kind of go up to them and say, would you be willing to walk alongside with me? Be that friend to them, and then know that they're going to pour into you that wisdom that they may have, or feel like those thoughts that help them along the way. So
I think that's a great thing that, oftentimes I hear women who say, I would love to have somebody mentor me, or I would love to have somebody speak into my life. But I do think there has to be a proactivity on our parts as the people seeking that, because let's face it, at least right now, there's not exactly like a match.com for mentors or something like that. And I have to say, I've tried to create some things like that before in seasons of ministry I've been in, tried to create something that would match people to somebody who'd be a great mentor. And what I found, Avery, was it was actually really kind of hard. It's one of those things that seems to need to happen organically. I know that in my relationship with your mom, who is both a dear friend and a really important mentor in my life, it did grow organically. And of course, we had the family relationship that had grown, through through a couple generations. But that didn't necessarily mean that she and I were going to be a great match in terms of understanding each other and speaking each other's language and having that trust where, she could speak into what was going on. So I do think that place of being willing to reach out, like you're talking about, looking to someone who's ahead of you. And I'm a big believer too in looking at someone who's, when I say behind, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but somebody who's up and coming in what's going on and investing in their lives. I know as a young mom, I often felt like I didn't really have a whole lot to offer because I was so in the scramble of trying to learn some things for myself. But I can look back now and think, wow, I could have interacted with somebody who was starting to date someone seriously, or even someone who didn't know if marriage or family was going to be part of their world and had an opportunity to speak into it. How are you staying connected to a younger generation? Because now you've got some experience on you. What are you doing to be intentional in that?
So like you had said, kind of thinking about people that might be behind me in the sense of those kind of walk those lines in life, whether it being like a mom. So for example, my brother, his wife is a new mom, and she sought out me at one point and was like, hey, what are your advice for where I am in this pregnancy? Or what's your advice for, baby gear, different things. And I think being open to giving that advice, but also seeking out friends that are kind of walking along that line as well, and just saying, hey, I'm here whenever you need, a conversation. I've had friends who had a baby 2 months behind me, and I said, call me up at 2 a.m. I'll be up, I promise. Yeah. Those kind of conversation of opening that door to those relationships, even if they're not asking for them, and just saying, I'm here to listen. I'm here to commiserate even. I'm here to, give book advice of things that I felt were helpful. And just offering that up and letting that person take the wheel, and letting them be the ones that saying, hey, I need help, or, hey, how are you? So those kind of conversations.
Right. I think you bring up something too that's interesting when you say letting them take the wheel, because sometimes we can do it unintentionally. but we can start stomping into areas in which we haven't been invited. And to have the wisdom to allow someone to drive the conversation or to take responsibility in ourselves if we're seeking someone out and asking what they would think, to be willing to drive that and to be willing to own it. Because oftentimes, here's what's interesting to me, Ave. I feel like sometimes there are people out there that they've got so many opinions to give you about everything that's going on when you haven't even asked. It's always been those people who hang back a little bit and who seem far more interested in letting me talk through what I'm concerned about, who tend to be some of the best mentors in my life. Do you find that to be true for you?
Oh, definitely. I've definitely had those relationships, even that just people randomly have come up and given me, thoughts that I was not even asking for, or, their advice or different things. But I think that allowing me to be the one, or that person to be the one to steer the conversation and approach that person is helpful, because you're going to get that better. You're going to get that better transaction, essentially, of like how that conversation is going to go, how you're going to feel like you're helping them and then they're helping you. So that's how I kind of would answer that question.
Right. Now, riddle me this too with your parents. One thing that we see a lot in a lot of families today, of course, I've got 16 and a half years between my oldest and my youngest, who are twins. You have that experience too, where your oldest brother is about 17 years older than your youngest sibling. Mm-hmm. And that's because we had these big families spread over out a certain number of years. But we're finding a lot of families too that maybe there was a first marriage and they had a couple of kids, and then later they had a remarriage, or maybe they waited and put off having babies, and then they decided to have one more or had a surprise baby. And they've got these bigger age gaps in siblings than what we typically think of as maybe a 2-kid family with a 2.5-year age gap in between. What are some of the things that you think helped you stay connected to your siblings who were both, older? And when you're a kid, if you're 10 and your sibling's 20, that's a big jump. Or when you're 10 and your youngest sibling is 4, that's a big jump. So what do you think in your family dynamic helped inform keeping the sibling relationships close, even though the years and the ages and stages had some distance?
Yeah, so my older sister is 2.5 years older than me. Even that little of a gap can be, you cannot have that relationship. But then my oldest brother being 10 years older, what I think that I've tried to do over the years, as I have traveled a lot independently from my family and done a lot of different things outside of my family circle. And that has forced me to do is be intentional, be intentional with the relationship, be intentional with when I am home or calling up my siblings. I call up every one of my siblings every once in a while and talk to them, just say, hey, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? Let me share what's going on in my life. And keeping that relationship alive in a way has helped us all to stay very close to one another. And then even the same with my parents, like when I get to see them in person or talk over the phone or now FaceTime and different things, that time together where you intentionally have a conversation about your day or about what's going on, good or bad, has kind of fosters those really strong bonds. And I think that some friends of mine have said, Avery, we're friends because you reach out, you talk to me, you're my friend because you actually make that commitment to be there for me when I need you, or just on a regular day. I think about Madison, who is your eldest daughter. She and I have been friends for a really long time. A really long time. And it's because we've both chosen to be intentional with one another and have that conversation of just being there for each other. And I think my eldest brother, he called me about a week later, 2 weeks later, on his birthday, because we're very close. Our birthdays are in the same month. And he said, oh, I didn't call you on your birthday. And I was like, it's okay. I called you.
We got it done. It's fine. It's fine.
We're good, So just all of my siblings try, I think, to the best of their abilities to stay connected, even though some of them work together. Some of them, like my youngest brother and I, don't live in the same city and let alone the same state. And so we try to make sure that we have those conversations and be in each other's lives, even at a distance.
Right. And, you bring up something else that I think is really interesting, because you and Madison have been friends for such a long time, and you are the same age, and you both did grow up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you had many of the same experiences together. So of course you'd be connected, and yet you're married and with a second baby on the way. And she is in Chicago, not married, has a serious relationship, but not married. No babies on the way that I'm aware of anytime soon. I'm just, that grandma itch is, starting to really flare. But you guys have stayed connected. And I think that's another important point to make, that we don't want to not have people in our circle who are just in a different season of life, even if we're the same age. I mean, I think the power of continuing those friendships is so, so very important. You want to make a difference in the world, right? You want to be able to take the things that God's put in your heart and be able to pay that forward to other people. And then sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. Like, what is that purpose? And what is my call? And how do I get started? Well, I want to tell you about something simple you can do that can have massive impact in changing the world. And that is this. When you choose to be chosen through World Vision, you impact not only the life of the child who chooses you, but you also change their community. You help bring resources and hope and information into a community through that child, and it changes the world. I want to encourage you, as you pursue that desire to help change things in the world, I want to encourage you to take a simple first step that makes massive difference. Go to worldvision.org/AMD and sign up today to sponsor a child. It's one of the best things that you can do. It's one of the simplest things you can do to help completely change the world for a child. Go to worldvision.org/AMD. You've just come through a journey that I think is beautiful and really speaks to the fact that you have made such a commitment to these intergenerational friendships and relationships, because you and your dad have just taken on a project that you've dreamed of for a long time. You guys put together a children's book together. And I love that you guys got to do this. I'm going to bring your dad into our conversation. Walker's one of my very favorite people. We're going to let him in the room here and talk with him. So, there he is. There's Walker. Hey, I'm so glad you're here. I can't wait for my listeners to get to meet you. And we've been talking about the beauty of intergenerational relationships and friendships and the blessing that can be and how often we miss it, because so often we are looking more for people who are in our age and stage of life, and we are only feeling comfortable with them when there's so much wealth out there. So we were talking about that you guys have gotten to have this journey together of putting this children's book together. And of course you have a relationship as daughter and as dad, which is beautiful, but you're also bringing different experiences to this process. So Walker, what was your favorite part of beginning this project with Avery?
I think when we landed on the idea that we would do it, I knew immediately it was going to work. I'd been an admirer of Avery's work for a while, so I knew she could pull her, and I was kind of excited about getting to do it. I knew that she brought the art, and between us, we just enjoyed building the idea. So I think that from the very beginning, I thought it would work.
What was the biggest challenge in working with someone who is not only your daughter, but is someone who's kind of newly into the parenting game, and you're trying to develop a book that's going to appeal to both children and their parents? So come on, give us the skinny. What was the toughest part?
Well, she's a new parent, so that would be that gives you the very fresh perspective. I'm an old parent, so we brought that together. And also, she's a Pied Piper. So one thing that's always been true of Avery, when she walks in the room, kids are attracted to her. So she's got a very keen sense of what works. I think what I learned through this was my part seemed really easy. Well, we conceived of the idea. We talked about it. That was the fun. And then we would share what we were creating. I kind of had to do the initial writing of it in order for the illustrator part, the Avery, really what she brought, to turn it into pictures. I was amazed at how hard. I thought her job was a lot harder than mine.
Trying to come up with all the art. Walker, you've worked now. I mean, now you've had some history working on projects with several of your kids. And
Intergenerational.
I was going to say very intergenerational. And you've been a model to a lot of us on how to do that. What do you think is important for parents who maybe are bringing their kid into a family business, or they have a project they want to work on together, or whatever the thing is? What are some great things for parents to think about and remember when they begin to engage with their kids on a project?
The first place it goes to was along the way, as my sons, who I have been in business with for a bunch of years, I had to convert from being dad to a business partner and a consultant. And you've heard people talk about that, but as a dad, I'm bringing my business experiences to the needs that they have, but also raising them and seeing these young men grow up. But then that point where you had to step away and go, wait a minute, they're fully capable, and see them not through the dad's eyes, but through a kind of a consultant dad. They would sometimes whisper to me, don't tell the dad stories. You're so proud that and it wasn't appropriate in that setting any longer to convey it that way, because they were young men who, stories about their growing up just obviously didn't fly. So,
right.
Look, it's a blessing. I think the blessing we had was, hopefully there's a tremendous amount of trust. So the underpinning in any business situation is there's got to be trust. Employees are trusting you, and you're selling a vision, and they're buying into that. They want to know you've got their back. Hopefully we had that in kind of very, very strong. And in the music business, that's not there at all. There's no trust. It's a very backstabbing environment. So we had a leg up.
Because you had each other, and you knew you had each other's backs.
They had each other. The trust part was never really the question. It was the challenges out there, which is nice.
Right.
Get that squared away, and now let's all deal together with the job, which is to try and win at whatever you're doing. So
right. My second daughter and I, ran a nonprofit together for several years. And then oddly, in this one, we did manufacture. We've ended up working two different components of a business with some other people in our world. And that was one of those things that just happened. So it is a really interesting experience to work with your kids and to see how other people are experiencing them. Avery, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that, like my dad said, that, the trust element that I feel as we have created this book together, that, like Dad said, that, he had really written it and I had done the illustrations of it, and we trusted each other's capabilities and ability to do it well and then work together. And so I had so much confidence in our friendship and our relationship as a father-daughter, as also as a friendship, that I thought the book was going to also be very fun and very successful to do together. So,
yeah, as we would exchange, I would send a draft of what I was thinking. That would create ideas on her part. She'd begin to sketch things. And as an illustrator, that I am not, but she is, I observed her having to create that character, and the character evolves. And so a lot of the hard part is we go on to think about a series of books, which we plan. Now that she's got some of the initial characters down and the supporting characters who weren't there at the beginning, but here comes the snail, here comes the bee to go along with Henry and Harriet. Those popped out of her head. And that was fun to watch that and kind of be amazed at the illustrator having to create the world that you've put in text and she's put in pictures.
How do you guys manage creative differences? Because in my publishing world, if I have something I'm pushing toward or I've written and then I've got an editor up the line who says, no, we don't think that's going to meet the demographic or whatever, there's kind of a structure there in place that, we're not family. We're not having to gather for Christmas, having had, a throwdown or a particular idea or concept. So how do you navigate creative differences in this type of working relationship?
I'll start, Dad. So I think for us, it was giving each other a lot of grace and things that we may have butted heads about, but really I think we had a good head on our shoulders of just feeling like, I brought the art element and Dad brought the word element, and we were able to kind of navigate that together in a way that was really beneficial for us both.
And, there are some foibles with families working together. Sometimes you're not as honest as you might need to be in a business setting. Someone's not carrying their weight or something like that. And, how do I say that? And especially the parent, who's always teaching, and always caring. But we went into this really liking each other. Frankly, as father-daughter, we'd kind of been through a few things together. Actually, a couple little tight spots. She was a proven character. She'd been to Paris, she'd been to New York, and I watched all that. So anyway, high level of confidence, really liked each other, big trust. That's pretty promising right there.
Absolutely. Walker, what is your feeling on the importance of intergenerational relationships and friendships? Is that something you continue to pursue? Is that something you see great value in? Is it something you've kind of just fallen into through the years?
I think it's super critical. I was with half a dozen young men the other night, college age, saying, I'd like to make myself available to you because I've made mistakes. I've got a perspective. They were a lot of fun to be with. I'd already lived that part of life, but to see it again kind of was a lot of fun. And then I was able to say, hey, this is your deal. You're going to make these decisions, but let me tell you some things that I've learned so that you won't be wondering. All you're really doing is trying to eliminate the fear that maybe I'm the only one, that did that or something like that. So, gosh, it's a huge asset that people need to take advantage of. Probably young people could always ask that older generation, and they would be so stunned that they were asked, right?
Yeah.
And then so appreciative that someone might think that they had somebody to share with them. You're really tapping into a pretty big resource.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about the new book, Henry and Harriet, Sniffles and Sneezes. It means so much to me that the two of you got to do it together because I love you both dearly and have so benefited from our intergenerational relationship. Listeners, be sure you go out and get Henry and Harriet, Sniffles and Sneezes, and be looking for all the upcoming books. Avery Laughlin and Walker Hanson, love you both dearly and so very blessed to call you friends.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
You'll find more from this episode on the show notes. Be sure and check them out at allmomdoes.com. And wanted to ask you a big favor. Be sure and go to wherever you are listening to this podcast and give us a 5-star rating and review. It really helps us get the word out about the podcast. Can't wait to see you next time on the All Mom Does podcast.